everyone. Hope you are safe and doing awesome. This is Sana here, and I'm working as a community initiative lead at Recro. And I welcome you all in this webinar on dynamic programming. Today, we are having with us Siddharth Sethia, who is working as a senior software engineer with Swiggy. And this webinar is organized by Decro. Decro is a developer-centric organization, and where we are trying to connect developers' aspiration to the right opportunity by working with the high-growth startup like Swiggy, PureFit, Udan, Dunzo, and many others. So, fine then. I hope you are able to see us and hope you are able to hear us. Siddharth, if you can say hi or something.
Hi everyone. I hope I'm audible to everyone. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, awesome. So I'll just introduce you to the platform as well. We are on AirMeet right now. On the right hand side, you can see the raise hand option, wherein when you are asking question, you can raise your hand and ask your question, and you will be visible here. Your audio will be visible here, and then you can see the chat option, wherein you can do the normal chats, and then there will be Okay, and then there will be a question session. So I request you all to please ask your questions in the question section itself. Otherwise, we won't be able to match your questions and we might miss out something. Awesome then. So without doing further ado, let's get started. So on to you, Siddharth.
Okay. Uh, Hi. Hi everyone. Let me just share my screen and we'll talk about dynamic programming here. And it is one of the most, if I talk about the topic first, it is one of the most sought after topics for the interview preparation, particularly. And we have a lot of use as a developer. Also, we use it quite often. We will talk about a lot of things. How do we associate it with the real life examples and make it easy for us to learn? So I think the most important part of any topic when you're learning that is that how you manage to learn it for a longer duration of time. Unfortunately, with software engineers, that's a problem. Like whenever you are preparing for interviews, you have to actually set a time for yourself, like 2 3 months of duration, and then you are actually preparing for questions. Then you apply for the jobs. So that's something that happens in the software engineering domain, and which is unlike other domains wherein on the business side, like people usually what you're doing, you might have case studies, but here it's not the case. Here you have to understand the complex data structures which you might not be using in day-to-day life. So yeah, we have a lot of data structures like that, right? So dynamic programming is also one such concept. We use it, we might not use it, but then we are asked, and we have to make sure that if to land in a good product-based company or in a good startup, we need to go through all these kind of topics. So I'll share my screen. We'll go through the slides and we'll talk about the topics one by one, and we'll take some problems, and then we'll try to see how can we make it more convenient to learn, right? Okay. So here I'm sharing my screen. Is everyone able to see the screen? Okay, so these are the topics that we're going to take up, which is understanding DP concept, when to apply DP. This is a question like which is very commonly being asked: ki when should we know that DP can be applied or not? Then we have some practice problems. So in practice problems, we will try to understand the concepts of DP here, and then any question and answers. And in between also, if you have questions, please feel free to ask. Okay. So let's come to the very first part, which is understanding DP. Okay, and I have not given any definition to DP like any other complex definitions, but just simple terms I have kept here. Which is the first one is pre-compute. So pre-compute is nothing but whatever you are doing, it just asks you that have you pre-computed it or not. That's the first question DP would ask you, right? So whenever you are going to make any new computation, just check whether you have done it in the past or not. That's the first question that DP asks. Second thing is we talk about brute force, right? Whatever the solutions that we try to give in a brute force manner, we just say DP is nothing but a refined brute force. So it doesn't ask you that you do some extra set of things, but it just tells you that can you please think again what you are trying to do or whatever new calculations you are trying to do. So it's just a refined brute force. It is also called as enhanced recursion or recursion supplement. So recursion, in case if you have not gone through it, it's just a function calling itself as a simple recursion, right? Recursion supplement. So recursion, what recursion does is it does a lot of hard work. So basically, if you want to do some sort of recursion, it will recurse over the previous values. But DP tells to recursion that okay, you don't need to do a lot of hard work. I'll be here to help you so that you can do some smart work and you can achieve a lot of operational cost optimization that and it says time for some real life examples. So if I talk about real life examples, right, a human, I think no better examples you will find than a living organism itself, right? We learn from our mistakes, and that is what dynamic programming teaches us. Whatever you do in the past, try to make sure that you use it as an experience in your forthcoming decisions. So any example in real life, right? Whether you earn money so that tomorrow, if you want to buy something expensive, you know that okay, you have saved it from the past. You don't need to earn the same amount of money at each point in time in life. You can use it from the previous experiences. That is just one very basic example, but any such examples you find, DP will always be applying that.
Hi,
So it
Siddharth.
just tells you that okay,
So
yes,
sorry to interrupt. I think people are facing issues with the voice. So if you can just hide your video right now and we can continue the presentation. And
okay,
once the explanation part comes, the whiteboard one, you can come and show your video there.
okay, sure,
I'm so sorry, guys, if you're facing that issue.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. So okay. So till now we were just discussing about the what to say, and trying to understand the DP concepts to some these small terms. I hope I would have been able to explain these terms. Like as I said, just 2 to 3 terms you need to remember pre-compute. So whatever next steps we are going to do, we just need to do a pre-compute. If just check that if we have already done that compute, let's not do it again. Let's not repeat things which we have already done. In short, it's dynamic programming. Moving to next is when to apply DP, right? So there is no short trick. Okay, first of all, it's a concept. So there are no short tricks like okay, these type of questions. If you see, you just apply the DP. So that's why I have mentioned a very important word which says possibilities. Okay, so it's a possibility that if you come across such situation, you can apply DP. The first one is repeated subproblems in this algorithm. So repeated subproblems, like it again traces back to the definition of DP, which says, if you have something already being done, let's not do it again. So that's why it says repeated subproblems in the algorithm. Second one is when you have choices to make. Okay. Now, when I say recursion supplement, right, which was one of the terms in the previous slides, when you say recursion supplement, that doesn't mean wherever recursion is there you apply DP. No, that won't work, right? Only when you have choices to make. Okay, when you are branching out, then you can think of applying DP, and your subproblem repetition would be there. Third thing is finding optimal solutions. So whenever you want to find optimal solutions, and what I mean by optimal is I have defined it, be it minimum, maximum, smallest, greatest, or all kind of things. Whenever you see such kind of things, we call it as optimal solutions, and in these cases only we can think of applying DP. So again, coming back, if you have questions around how to exactly when to apply DP, no, that's quite subjective, depends and differs from one problem to the other. But yes, there are certain patterns that you can see, and this is quite like DP because the more questions you solve, the more patterns you find that whether I can apply or not. So yeah, that's one thing when to apply dynamic programming. Yeah. Okay, now I have given some practice problems because this is a topic which needs a lot of practice than talking about the theoretical part, because that's quite less here. It's a very small concept but really difficult to apply at times if not understood well. So before coming to practice problems, there are various terms associated with dynamic programming. Let me just talk about it. One of the terms is top-down approach, and some people call other approaches as bottom-up approach. Okay, so my suggestion while you are studying DP, let's not get into the complexities of top-down and bottom-up. Top-down means nothing, but you're going to a bigger part and coming down to the smaller part, and bottom-up is like you're trying to fill the smaller parts and going to the bigger part. That's the literal meaning of top-down and bottom-up. So that should be easy to understand. But some people say one thing as memoization, some people say other as dynamic programming. Let's not do that. let's call everything as dynamic programming so that it becomes very clear in our mind. So that's why I don't want to get into the complexities of these terms. So top down and bottom up, just two simple meanings. From large set of problems to smaller set is top down. From smaller set to large set is bottom up. Right. Here, okay, I will talk about the. I will. Hello. I will be talking about the very first practice problem here, which is minimum steps to one. I will define the problem first, and then we will try to see, okay, where do we see recursion, where do we see dynamic programming, what can we do with top down, what can we do with bottom up, all these kind of approaches I will try to share here. Let me just read out the question once so that we are clear with it, and I'll also write it on the whiteboard. Okay, so it says given a number n, count minimum number of steps to minimize it to 1. So, and how do we, when we say minimize it to 1, what does it exactly mean is, either you can reduce it n by 1, which is like n minus 1, or you can divide it by 2 if it is divisible by 2, or you can divide it by 3 if it is divisible by 3. Let's take a number 6 for example. So with 6, what you can do is, since it is divisible by 3, I divide it by 3, I get 2. So in one reduction, I have got 2. Now I see that 2 is divisible by 2, again divide it by 2, I get 1. So in mere 2 steps, I can reduce 6 to 1. So the answer is going to be 2. What you can do with 6 other than this is 6 minus 1. You can always do a minus 1, right? From any integer, if you want to do, you can always do a minus 1. So 6 minus 1 is 5. Then 5 is not divisible by 2 or 3. So again, the third option, the obvious option you have left is n minus 1. So you do 5 minus 1, which is 4. Then again you divide, let's say you have multiple options. You can divide 4 by 2, or you can just do 4 minus 1. So this is something, these are the number of steps, but we just need to get the minimum number of steps. Okay. So is the problem statement fine to everyone? Okay. Now this problem really becomes interesting if somebody has a doubt, like if we go by the greedy approach, let's say, right? Greedy approach, if we talk about, so 10 divided by, let's take an example of 10. Okay. Now if you think like 10 is divisible by 2, and I can get, I can simply reduce it to 5 by just one step. So 10 divided by 2 is 5. You got to 5. Okay. Now what will you do when you are at 5? 5, you can just do minus 1. So 5 minus 1 is 4. Now when you see 4, if you adopt greedy, you divide it by 2, you get to 2. Now again, you divide it by 2 and you get to 1. So in total, we got 4 steps. Is that clear? Like how did we get 4 steps? 10 divided by 2 is 5. 5 minus 1 is 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. So in 4 steps, we reduce 10 to 1. Okay. But can there be a better approach? We adopted greedy. And then we counted 4 steps. But if I had done it like this, 10 minus 1 is 9. 9 divided by 3 is 3. And 3 divided by 3 is 1. If I do that, then I just have 3 steps to take care of, right? So I just have 3 steps. If I do not go by greedy, that means we have found an exception to greedy, and hence we cannot apply greedy solution here. We have to think something else. I hope this is clear to all. And now we will be starting with the board. I'll try to show here. Okay. Stop share my screen. Okay. Okay, so the board is visible, right? Okay.
Yes, Siddharth.
So here it is with was I talked about n. Okay. I hope this is clearly visible. We talked about n is equals to 10, and we want to reduce it to step. We want to reduce it to n is equals to 1. So the ways with which we can go is 10 minus 1 is 9. 9 divided by 3 is 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. So the count is 3. Or if I go with 10 divided by 2 is 5. 5 minus 1 is 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. And 2 divided by 2 is 1. The count is 4. My answer should be 3. So basically, I need to go with such an approach. Now, if I go with such an approach, that one thing is for sure that I don't know whether n minus 1 would help me, n by 2 would help me, or n by 3 would help me. I don't have any clue about it. And if I don't have any clue about it, then I always need to know the minimum of this, and minimum of this. Right? So let's try to write a recursive function first. We will talk about DP later. Just try to write a recursive function because there are a lot of sub problems we try to see, because every time you will have multiple choices to make. When you are at 9, you might divide it by 3 and get 1. When you are at 9, you might just reduce it by 1 and get 8. So a lot of numbers would repeat in between. Okay. So let's try to write a recursive function for it, and then we'll think about the dynamic. So a simple function is like, let's say I'm writing it in Python. You can choose Java, C, whatever you're comfortable with. But Python is like quite readable, so I think we can read it for all of you. So def, let's say find minimum, and minimum what it takes is, it takes a number n. It takes a number n. Now the recursion, when you say recursion, right, the very first thing that you need to know about recursion is, when do you have to stop the recursion? When you say that I have 1, I should stop the recursion. So I say if n is equals to 1, what I am going to do is return 0. And why am I returning 0? I could have returned 1 also. Because when you are at 1 itself, you don't have to take an extra step to reduce it to 1, right? When you are at 1, you say you have to take 0 steps to be at 1. So that's why we do a return 0. Otherwise, what we are going to do? So I have a result variable. What it does is 1 plus, I'll recursively call this, and what recursion says is you just take care of n. I'll take care of n minus 1 things, you just take care of one thing. Okay. So 1 plus, I will again call this function, and it says find of n minus. So this I am doing for n minus 1. I know that any number I can reduce it to minus 1. So I have done result is equals to 1 plus find minimum of n minus 1. Why 1 plus step? Because when you do this step, you will be making one step. So we have to count that, and that's why we are doing 1 plus. Okay. You cannot reduce it by 2 unless it is divisible by 2. So I am just putting a check. If n percentage 2 is equals to 0, then I will do find minimum of n by 2. So result is equals to 1 plus find minimum of n by 2. So I can write one more thing then. If n percentage 3 is equals to 0, I will write result is equals to 1 plus find minimum of n by 2. Okay. Now I have done this, I have done this, I have done this. But what exactly do we want? We want an optimal solution. We want the minimum count. If you have to get the minimum count, let's use minimum. So result, I'm just changing this statement a little bit. Result is equals to minimum of the already obtained result, comma, this new value. Here also I say result is equals to minimum of already obtained result, comma, this value. So this is your simple recursion, and we return a result. Is this clear? Is this recursion function clear? Okay, cool. So now recursion is doing a lot of hard work here, right? Because it is calculating a lot of sub problems here. It is not again and again. It has to go through this, and this. Now dynamic programming will come and say, okay, let's not do this. You continue doing what you are doing. I'll just help you a little bit. And how I am going to help you is, let's maintain a cache. You can say it as a cache, or you can say it as an array. So there was a question that do we use dynamic programming in real life? Yes, we do use when you use cache, right? When you're using cache, you don't talk to your databases. You just simply pick values from cache. You just send it to as a response. Like this is something most of us would have done, right? So that's where your dynamic programming comes into picture. This is simply in memory that we are doing. We do it on distributed networks as well, right? Okay. So dynamic programming says just maintain a cache, just store the results. It might be helpful to you. Okay, that's what dynamic programming says. So if you have to store the result, I'm just changing this function a little bit. it will say, okay, let's say I have an array, okay, just an extra array to show. Before you do all this, all these things, what I will try to do is, okay, if array of n is greater than 0, then return array of n. So basically, before doing all this big calculation, right, it says that if you have already done that, don't repeat it. Okay. How would you already do that? We'll try to see it. Okay. So we are just returning this value right from here, and that's where DB comes into picture. Okay. Now recursion says, okay, if you have not found here, then I'll be helpful. So recursion comes here, do all these things. Now DBA comes again to recursion. Okay, now you have calculated, now you are happy. Just do me one favor. Array of n is equals to result. Just store the result before you return it. And that's DB applied here. Is that clear? Right? Okay. Now, what was this approach basically? So, this was a kind of top to down approach, right? Because we came with a bigger number and then we have a base condition. So, recursion always works on top to down approach. If it was the other way, it would have been an iterative solution, correct? So, DP recursion we explained, DP we explained it was a top to down approach. But what about bottom to up approach, right? Bottom to up approach, let's try to see that. Let's say you are doing it for number 10. Okay. So bottom to up approach says try solving for smaller values. Now when you are at n is equals to 0, n is equals to 0 doesn't make sense because the problem statement itself is n is equals to 1. You have to reduce it to n is equals to 1. So I say n is equals to 1. Okay. At n is equals to 1, what extra steps? I just ignore it simply. At n is equals to 1, what is the extra step that you are going to take? Nothing. It is going to be 0. When you are at n is equals to 2, okay, what will you do? You are just doing 1 plus previous step, right? So it will be how much? 1. Either you can come from here, or what you can do is you can simply divide it by 2. So the minimum will be 1. When you are at n is equals to 3, you are not doing anything but just from the previously calculated value, you say 1 plus 1 is 2. So it is 2. But here, if you divide it by 3, you can again go back to 1. So that's just one step. Between 2 and 1, you just choose 1. I'm just trying to fill it out till 10. Okay. At any given point in time, I would always know, okay, that what is the minimum number of steps, and I'm going to that is going to help me in subsequent numbers. When I say n is equals to 4, now when I say n is equals to 4, what is the previous value? 1. If you add one more step, either it will be 2. So min of 2, comma. If I divide it by 2, I go to 2. What is the value here? 1. So one step to go to 2 and plus 1 to go back to 1. So it will be minimum of 2 comma 2. So it is, this is how we are going to fill up in a bottom up approach. Is that clear? Is that clear to all? Whichever approach you are comfortable with, you can go with it. But my suggestion is always try to think whether can I apply a bottom-up approach or whether should I apply a top-down approach. And one very important suggestion, okay? Do not ever say that I'm thinking it in top-down approach or in bottom-up approach. Okay, it's quite subjective because the moment you go along with these terms, it can be quite complicated at times. Okay, so just think it of as a DP. I'm just providing an alternative solution. That's my way of thinking of alternative solutions. Right? Okay. So let's talk about this. Now, when I say bottom-up approach, does it use recursion? No, it doesn't use recursion at all. It's purely iterative solution. So there are people who say recursion is always associated with DP. No, that's not a correct answer. Even your iterative solutions might have DP. So you have def find minimum n and n. So what we say is array of 1 is equals to 0. This is what we say. If I'm ignoring quantum conditions, I'm just trying to write the base logic here. So what we'll do is, since it's an iterative solution and not recursive, we will definitely use a for loop. So we'll say um, for I in range of 2 to what we will say is n plus 1. Okay. So you start your this thing from here, and what do you say? What you say is if so array of 1 is equals to 0. So what we will do is array of I, or let's do this. Result is equals to um, result is equals to min of 1 plus array of I minus 1, comma 1 plus array of I by 2, comma 1 plus array of I by 2. Whatever is minimum we take. Whatever is minimum we take. Okay, we do a minimum of this, and then what we say is array of I is equals to whatever the result is, and then we will return whatever the value of array of n. So it nowhere uses recursion, it's a pure iterative solution. I mean, it's just a basic algorithm approach, like we can check for the boundary conditions here. But the idea is, I'm just trying to fill array of I at any given point in time. And that's how I proceed till n. Once I have found my n, this will be outside the for loop, but it will be returned. Okay. So this is about this problem where we talked about minimum steps to 1. Okay. Uh, any doubts here? Any questions? Okay. So there are some questions. Let's talk about it. So is DP and memorization same? So I would say memorization is a part of DP. Okay. So if DP is a superset, memorization is a subset. In find minimum n minus 1, it should also pass array. Okay, yeah, that's fine. I mean, we are discussing the. I mean, you can have the exact working code with you. You can always do that. But here, my focus is entirely on talking about the concept here. There might be here and there few mistakes. That's fine. Is bottom to up is DP and top to bottom is memorization? Yes, that's how the definitions are being made. But there are it's quite debatable in the sense that there are people who call top to bottom both and bottom to up as dynamic programming. How to approach a problem in tabulation form? It is not necessary that you always have a tabulation form to solve. So a lot of people make this mistake is whenever they see a DP question, they try to create a n cross n matrix and try to solve it. If you always go by that, that's the higher chances that you might land into problems there. Okay. Bottom up approach again, please, was not able to see clearly at that time. Shall I repeat bottom up approach again? Okay.
Okay, so that people feel like they want to see the bottom of the approach.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But if we can cover up all these questions first and then we can go on to the bottom
Sorry?
up. If we can cover up all these questions first and then we can go ahead with the bottom up approach again.
Okay, look, let's talk it about here only. I'll talk
Okay,
about here only. I'll repeat it.
awesome. Yeah.
So again, just one more question I'm addressing. Like it says 1 plus, why are we adding 1 here? Because 1 shows the number of counts. It adds the count. The moment you do array of I by 2, you're taking one more step and you need to count that step. That's why you do a 1 plus. Now, in this bottom up approach, what we are trying to do is, let me just try to explain it from here. I don't care about n is equals to 0 as I said, right? I will start from n is equals to 1 because this is my problem. So I forget about this array. Now n is equals to 1, n is equals to 2, n is equals to 3. These are various values of n up to n is equals to 10. Okay. So what I try to do is from the previous value. Now when you are at n is equals to 1, if n is equals to 1, what we say is just mark this value as 1. Sorry, mark this value as 0 because you don't need to jump to any other step. It is always going to be 0. Bottom up approach says that whatever greater values of n are, you should always try to calculate it from the previous values. Now, how do I get it from the previous values? Is from 2 to 1. What I can simply do is I can always do an n minus 1. That's just one step, right? Or either it is 1 plus area of I minus 1. 1 plus this one, which area of I minus 1. So here it is what value? 1 plus 0 is 1, comma 1 plus area of I by 2. I can do this as well, right? So 1 plus area of I by 2. What is that? 2 by 2 is 1. So again it is 0. So 1 plus 0 is 1. 1 plus 0 is 1. So this answer is going to be 1. Okay. We do not have here 1 plus area of I by 3 because 2 is not divisible by 3. Now, when I talk about n is equals to 3, so minimum of 1 plus area of I minus 1. So minimum of 1 plus area of I minus 1 is area of 2, which is 1 plus 1, comma 1 plus area of I by 2 you cannot do because 3 is not divisible by 2. So area of I by 3, if you do area of I by 3, so area of I by 3 is going to give you here. So 1 plus 0. So the answer is going to be 1. So this is also. Is this clear now? Or shall I go on with some more examples? Let's just do it for n is equals to 4 as well. So minimum of 1 plus area of 3. Area of 3 is 1. So 1 plus 1 is 2. Comma 1 plus area of I by 2. So 1 plus area of I by 2 is 1 plus 1 is 2. So again 1 plus 1. And it is not divisible by 3. So minimum of these two is 2. So and this is how we'll be going on and filling all the values. I hope the approach is clear. Cool. So nothing with respect to the program, it is much easier. It is much easier because you don't have to write a recursive solution. You don't have to think about the base cases, and iterative solutions are always more intuitive than your recursive solutions. So I say therefore, let's say integer n that you are taking, and if you are doing if, then you can declare your array integer itself, and if n is equals to 1, then what we do is array of, or you don't need an if condition also, array of 1 is equals to 1. This is the very first condition. Then you do for, now already you have 1 is equals to 1, forget about 0, okay, what happens to 0 we don't care. For I in range, we will start from 2, we will go to complete the length of this n, and what we say is, result we always know that it is 1 plus minimum of 1 plus array of I minus 1, and we say if result percentage 2 is equals to 0, then result is equals to minimum of result comma 1 plus array of I by 2, and similar thing if result of percentage 2 is 3 is equals to 0, we say result is equals to minimum of result comma 1 plus array of I by 2. That's all. Okay, in the end, just a small step. Area of I is equals to result and return area of n. Why do we return area of n? Because this is what we were being asked. I hope that's clear. Any more questions? Can we say that solution for this problem is I equals to 2, result is equals to 1, 3, result is equals to 1, I. Sorry, I'm not really clear because in the chat it's a quite long expression to understand. Uh, okay, anything else? So while loop is still n plus 1 because it's in Python, okay, it can vary from language to language. So if you are doing it for n plus 1, it will go till n. And eventually you want to know what is the value of n, right? Okay, so this is the core logic. Just try to focus on the concept here. Coding is fine, right? You might be from different languages, different technologies you might be using, so that can differ, right? Uh, Better in performance, top down or bottom up? Now I would have a question to you all. What is better in performance, top down or bottom up? Bottom up is little better because top down means I start from 0, I go to n, I come back to 1. This is your top down approach. Bottom up is simple. I start from 0, I go to n. That's all. Okay. So moving on to the next problem, I hope we are fine with this. It's a very basic problem in DP. Like it's an intermediate kind of problem, and I took this problem because it uses both top-down and bottom-up approach. Okay. Let's see the other problem. A very famous problem. This is a coin change problem. And what is this coin change problem says? Like it's a very real life application, right? Let's say you want to give change to someone and you have a lot of coins with you. So there can be a number of possible combinations. So it says given a value n, if you want to make change for n rupees, and we have infinite supply of coins. So we have 1 rupee coin infinite, 2 rupee coins infinite, and 3 rupee like 5 rupee and so on. Okay, in how many ways can we make the change? So this is what this problem says. Now there can be multiple choices. So as I said in one of the in one of the slides that we talked about, that whenever you have choices to make and when you have sub problems, so these are the possibilities where that DP is going to be, DP can be applied. Okay. So talking about this, particularly this about coin change problem, let's say you have to make a change for 4 rupees and you are given only with 1 rupee and 2 rupee coins. So what are the possible values here? 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1 and 2, and that's all, right? So you have two possible options. Either you can choose 4 ones, or you can choose 2 twos as well. So there you have three options basically: 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1 and 2, and 2 comma 2. These are the three options that you can do, and the answer for this coin change problem, that what will be the value? It will be 3. These are all the possible values you have. Now how to approach this problem is the question. So I'll stop sharing here. Okay. Are we clear with the problem? Okay. So as I said, let's say n is equals to 5, and again we have 1 rupee and 2 rupee coins. Okay. So what are the possible values that we have? 1, 1, 1, 1, and 1. Okay. What are the other possible values that we have? 1, 1, 1, and 2. Okay. What is the other possibility? 1, 2, and 2. That's all. No other possibility. Right? Okay. So here the answer to this one would be 3. Okay. Okay. Similarly, you can have you can check it for smaller values as equals to 6 and 7, and then you can try to understand it better. But the crux of this problem is now the problem is, should I choose 1 or should I choose 2 is one of the questions, right? Can I form this value without 1? Can I form this value without 2? Or what should I do? Or should I make use both of it? So that's the problem of that's the main crux of this problem. So the solution is also around this, that you are making a choice whether to choose 1 or to whether choose 2. Okay. and we have infinite supplies that we already know. So to choose one or to choose two, this should be the base of our problem solution, and we'll try to see how we are going to use it. So let's have a function which is like find form. It takes in a value n. Okay. Takes in the array that we have, which is your, let's say, given array, which is, let's say, d is the array that you are being given with, and number of values are given as k. So what we have done is we are finding count for n, which is our number. Let's say n is equals to 5 or it is 4. We have a d, so d is nothing but your array, which is 1, comma 2. Okay, and then you have a value k, which is nothing but these are the number of values. So I know that the number of 1 rupee coins I have infinite, number of 2 rupee coins is infinite, but this is number of coins, unique coins that we have. So k is equals to 2 here in this case. Okay. Now, how to solve this? So let's see the tree for this particular problem. So when you solve for 5, okay, what you can do is either you can choose 1 or you choose 2. Okay. When you choose 1, right? When you choose 1, so the number you are left with is 1, 4, and still you have again 1, comma 2. This is the area. When you choose 2, you are left with 3. Okay. Sorry. When you choose 2, when you don't choose 1, so you are left with 5 as it is, and then your array becomes just only 2. Okay. When you have 4, so either you can choose a 1 or you can choose a 2. When you choose 1, basically you will reduce it, and your array will be 1, comma 2. And when you don't choose 1, then it will be as it is 4, and it will be. Okay. So again here if I come, so I can't make 5 with 2, right? I can't make and when we get to know this is we are just 2 ones. So I say okay, I use this 2, I have 3 left and I am left with only 2 rupee coins. Okay. Here it is like I have calculated 2 and I am left with 2 rupee coins. I have used 2 and I am left with 1 and I have 2 rupee coins. Now I can't do this. I cannot do this. I cannot form 1 rupee from 2 rupee coins. Okay. Similarly, when we go here 3 and 1, comma 2, so I do 2, 1, comma 2, and I do 3 and 2. Okay. So here I am repeating my problems. I have to form a 2 rupee here as well. I have to form a 2 rupee here as well. I have to form 3 here as well. I have to form 3 rupee here as well. So this is what I call as multiple subproblems being repeated, and this definitely it makes a case for us for applying the dynamic programming. Is that clear till now? Any questions? Okay. Okay. So let's move towards the solution. We say if n is equals to 0, right? When would be n 0? When you will be finally reducing it to 0, when you are no more n to be left, so we will return what? We will return 1. So we return a 1 when n is equals to 0. It might so happen that your n can go less than 0 also. So let's say you have a 2 rupee coin and you want to make 1 rupee, you might do 1 minus 2 becomes minus 1. If such a case happens, you simply return a 0. This is an extra case particular to this particular problem. So if it ever goes less than 0, so we are just returning 0. That's all. What else? If we are no longer left with any number of coins, right? If my number of coins is 0, let's say I have 0 number of coins, I can't do anything, I just return 0. All base cases done, any other base case left? No. Right? We have taken a case on n, we have taken a case on k. K is nothing but it represents d in a way, and we have taken both the cases. We are done. Now we talked about two different choices to make. What is one choice? Choice one. I will use a coin. I will use a coin. Okay. So let's say I use a coin. If I use a coin, what we are going to do is we are again going to recursively call it. We will write the recursion here. And what will be choice two? Find it down. Again, we will recursively call. So we have two choices to make and two calls like this will be. Pure recursion. Choice one, choice two. In the end, what do I return? Return choice one plus choice two. That's all. So I'm done with my recursive function, but I have to write these two parameters. How do I write it? So I talked about 5. Right? Either you choose one. When you choose a 1 rupee coin, you just have to calculate for 4 rupees, and your whole array you again have more one number of 1 rupees and 2 rupees. And when you don't choose one, you are just left with 2 rupee coins, and you have to solve for 5 rupees. Is that clear? So when I did not accept one, I gave the responsibility of changing coins to 2 rupee coins. Like मैं one use नहीं कर रहा, now 2 is responsible for making 5 rupee change. Okay. So this is what we are doing. So these are the two conditions that you have. Okay. How do you use one? When you use one, you say n minus d of. Let's say I have one more pointer here, start pointer. I'll tell you what is the use of it. Start is nothing but initialized with 0. Okay. So n minus d of start. Because I use the very first element. That's why I have reduced my n. So this is the reduced n, right? Because 5 minus 1 is 4. Now I will set the complete array. So I set d. I set all the values because my d is going. So my number of values are also same. So k goes. And I do here start plus 1 because I have already used the very first value. In the second case, what is the choice? If I don't use 1, that means my n is not reduced. So n is as it is. Okay. This is fine. Right? Then what I said is d of d plus 1. So what does d plus 1 mean here? I mean, it again depends on the different languages. But d plus 1 means if I have an array of 1, 2, 3, so d of 1 becomes only 2, 3. Okay. So this is what I am sending. My k will reduce by 1. My k reduces by 1 and start goes as this. Is that clear? Is that clear? So this was a pure recursive solutions. Now, how do we introduce DP? So DP says nothing to worry. Just take an extra array. Before doing all this, just return it from. So it's exactly the same what we did before as well. So here we will take. I don't have the space here, but here I am going to take some array here. Okay. Let's say result. Let's say some temp array I will take or a DP array itself I will take. Okay. Let me take a DP array. If I find that value in DP itself, I will return it from here. Otherwise, before sending this, I will store this value in my DP and send it back. That's all. So this is just the DP implementation in a recursive solution. Okay. So any doubts here? Yes. So somebody has asked to use DP. I have to use array all the time. So arrays, yes, I mean that's how you store the values, right? You just need a basic data structure to store the value. If you are comfortable with any other data structure which will give you this much flexibility to store the values, you feel free to use it. So that is it. Okay. Somebody has written, please explain d plus one. Why we did do a d plus one? So d plus one is nothing but if I have an array like this, one, two, three. When I'm not using one, I want this one to be completely excluded from my array. So I do a d plus one. You can in different languages like Java would not support d plus one. What you can do is you can just do a d of start plus one kind of thing, or you can just modify the array. You can keep on modifying the array all the time when you are not using it. What is k minus 1? So k minus 1 is basically when you are not using 1, right? What was k? K was the distinct value you had in array initially. When you are not using 1, your k got reduced by 1. So k becomes 2. Okay. So this was about the coin change problem. There is a bottom-up approach as well, but I would like to take one more problem statement here with the given time frame that we have. So that's why I'm moving to that. But yes, of course, there is there is a bottom-up approach as well in the coin change problem. Please try that one as well. Or if you want, we can just discuss the basic of it. Let's try to see it as well. Okay, I mean let me show bottom-up approach as well for coin change also, so that we are comfortable with both the solutions. Code part we can just see later. So we say n is equals to 5 and number of coins are d is equals to 1 to 2. Okay. Now it's a choice. It's a choice that we have to make. So what I'm going to do is n is equals to 1, n is 2, n is 3, n is 4, n is 5. This is my bottom of process. But now it can't be just one dimensional, right? Because I have two choices to make. Correct? Either it is 1 and it is 2. Okay. So I have a 1 rupee coin as well and I have a 2 rupee coin as well. So let's see like this. Let's try to fill this all values. And in the end, we will get our answer here. Okay. Now what bottom of approach is, if you have only 1 rupee coin and you want to keep one rupee change you want to have, there is just one way, right? So I fill it with 1, like we did in the previous question also. Okay. So if you have only, forget about 2 rupee coins, I have just 1 rupee coin. If I have 1 rupee coin, there is just one way to make 1 rupee. There is just one way to make 2 rupees. It's 1 comma 1. It's just one way. There's just one way to make 3 rupees. So it is all 1, 1, 1. There is no other. Correct? Now when you have 2 rupee coins, and 1 rupee coin both, okay, you have both of them, and you want to make 1 rupee. You cannot use 2 rupees, right? You cannot use 2 rupees. So whatever is the above calculated result will come as it is. It is 1. There is just one way of doing it. So when I come to this row, it means that I have both 1 rupee and 2 rupee. When I just at this row, it means that I only have 1 rupee. Now how to calculate 2 rupees? Because 2 is equals to 2, okay, because 2 is equals to 2, I can use a 2 rupee coin, or I can have the previously calculated value which is 1, okay, I have the previously calculated value which is 1, so 1 plus 1 is 2 methods I will have, okay. Here if you see, 3 rupees you have to make it turn 2 rupee and 1 rupee coins. If I use 2, right, if I use 2, then I will be left with 1 rupee, I will be left with 1 rupee. And to make 1 rupee with 1 rupee, it is one way to do it. Okay. So what will be the solution here? It will be again 2. If I make 2 rupee coins, or if I go ahead with 1, so max of these two will be always 2. Now when you are at 4, right? When you are at 4, what are the different ways that are possible? So max of the previous value plus 1, which is, sorry, max of when you use a 2 rupee coins, when you use a 2 rupee coin, you are left with 2 rupee. Okay, and there are two methods to go about it. So there are 3 such methods. to fill this approach. And when you are at 5, again what you can do is when you use a 2 rupee coin, you are left with 3 rupees, and for 3 rupees you have 2. So 3 plus sorry 2 plus 1 is 3 rupees. Okay. So eventually we are left with 3 such methods towards the end. So this was the bottom up approach. Okay, about the coin change problem. You can use any one of them, whichever you are comfortable with. But just for practice, we should be comfortable with both the approaches if it is applicable at all. Let's look at the next question now. Any questions? Please go on posting here. So again, one of the very famous problems. You want to read it as a robot in a grid, or you can read it as robot in a grid or a rat in a maze problem, right? So both have the same problem statement. They are at one end of an m cross n matrix, and they want to reach to the other extreme end. So you can imagine it like a robot is at a top left corner of an m cross n grid, and it wants to reach the what to say top bottom right. How what will be the find the count of unique paths here involved. So you have to find all the possible paths, and there are blockers also. So it's not a very straightforward question. Then that number of paths will be fixed. There are blockers. So blockers means you cannot step on those particular blockers. Let's have a look at this problem as well. Stop sharing. I hope the problem statement is clear. So the problem statement says to have n cross n matrix. This is what 0, 1, 2. This is 0, 1, 2. Rat is here and wants to reach here. Okay. So this is all. Let's say 0, 0. This is 1. This is 0. This is 0. This is 0. This is 1. This is 0. So here is one blocker that I have, or another blocker is. If I have one here, yeah. So I have one blocker here, one blocker here. Blocker means that it cannot come to this path, it cannot cross this path. And how a rat can move? Either it will go in this direction or it will go in this direction. Either it goes towards right or it goes to its left. It will go to its right only if it's a 1, right? Only if it's a 0. If it's a 1, it cannot move there. So one path is this. Now if it goes down, it is not possible. So it goes here. Now it goes down and reaches. That is one path. Let me try for any other path if possible. If I come here and if I go here, right, I can't cross anywhere. Right? I can't go anywhere. That means I don't have any other path to go with. But there can be different blockers and there can be different set of paths. Here it's just one path, which is this. Okay. So basically, how do we solve this problem, or how do we even approach this problem? I know that I am going to visit a lot of paths, right? Are there any choices to make first of all? Yes, I have a choice to make. Whether should I move right, should I move down? There is one more check I have to make. Am I going out of the matrix itself? Okay. So the problem statement is we have to make a choice whether I have to go to this path or to the other path, which side I have to go, should I visit this particular block or not. So there are a lot of choices that you are making. You're making sure whether it's a 0 or not, whether it's a 1 or not, whether it's a top right, top down, whether it's a top right or only down. Okay, so these are the choices that we have to make. So let's think about this problem statement as to reach to the bottom right. What you have to do? If you somehow manage to reach at this point, or if you somehow manage to reach at this point, your job is done, right? Either you reach here or you reach here. That should be enough. Okay. What is this point? If there are R rows and C columns, this is nothing but R minus 1 comma C, and this point is nothing but R comma C minus. To reach to this path, I have to either reach this or I have to reach this. To reach to this path, I have to reach either this or this. To reach to this particular RC minus 1, again I'm tracing it back. Okay, I'm tracing it back. I assume that robot has reached here and I'm trying to trace it backwards with one point each in the possible directions. Right? If I get to manage, and if I am at the end, if I am able to go to the origin, which is my 0 comma 0, that means I get my path and I will keep that path. You can store that path, you can have a count of that path, or you can return a true false. So in this case, we want to find count of path, so we will just keep on adding the pointer here, or you can just store it in the list as well, whichever way you want. Okay. Now, how to solve this problem? So we have def find path. Some array is there. Okay, this is like input. Okay, my input array is there. What I'm going to do is if um, input array, and I should have some DJ also. Let's say it's to 0, and j is equal to 0, and what we can do here is, this is my initial pointer, this is my j pointer, so I is nothing but your row length and j is nothing but your column length. So this is your back part. Now what you're going to do is, let's say get path, right? You need to define this particular integer count is equals to 0. If get path of input array I and j, then count is equals to count plus okay. So I'm just trying to return the count. If I ever reach at 0, if I ever reach at origin, then my job is like basically I will be returning the count. Okay. I have not returned this function get path input array of I and j. Let's try to write this function and then we will try to see okay how do we find the count. So every time I get a path, I just increase the count. This will go on increasing. In the end, I return the count. That's a very simple function to write. Now the complex part is how to write this particular part. So let me just write that. Now let me tell you that this will be returning a boolean function because we said if get of path, then we increase the count. So it's a boolean value that we will be returning. So we will return a true or false. So we will have an input array. We have an I equal j. So I is length of rows, j is length of columns. If I is equals to 0 and then j is equals to 0, then we return a true value. We return a true value. Otherwise, what we do is whatever pointer that we have, right? Let's say I have created a what class? Coordinate class. What this class coordinate contains is it has x and y variables. So basically, x and y is nothing but your x and y is nothing but your x coordinate and y coordinate. So I'm using that class and this returns true, this is I is equals to 0, j is equals to 0. And what we are going to do is, we talked about r minus 1 comma c and r and c minus 1. Any of these two, is, if this is accomplished, then we are done with our job. So recursively, what we will do is get path of r minus 1 comma c and input array also. I minus 1 comma j, or get path of input array I or j minus 1. Either of these conditions is there, then what we say, we return a true, else we return a false. Okay. What can be the other condition? If that should be fine. If get path of input array of I minus 1 and j, and get path of input array of I j minus 1, then we return a true, otherwise we return a false. If you want, you can use this pointer as well. This we will use later. But as far as recursion is concerned, this should be suffice. Right? You can have some boundary checks, like those are like customary checks that you can put. The customary checks are, it should not go out of bounds. It should not go out of bounds, as in whatever the row or column values are there, it should not exceed or it should not go below 0. So for that condition, you can return false. You can write that, but the main logic is lies here. Either of these two, if either of these two is achieved, you return a true. Otherwise, you return a false. Okay. This is purely recursive solution. Now, how to go with the dynamic program here? So dynamic programming will tell this that okay, the problem with your solution is you might visit a lot of paths again and again. Like you might visit a lot of paths again. So I came to here, and again for some reason I came here. It might be a possibility that because of going, for example, top down, I have already covered this, and because of some other iteration, I am again coming to this particular path. I am not keeping a track of which path I should not go. Right? Now, this is a very common problem statement. I think all of us would have faced that what things we should not do at times, right? So this is that problem that you see in dynamic programming. To maintain that, now DP comes for its rescue and says, okay, now if you ever come across any of the failed path, just store it, okay? And just before making any calculation, just see whether that point lies in that particular failed path or not. So what we will do is, I told you about that coordinate class, right? I told you about that coordinate class, which has like this looks like this thing. If I write in terms of Java, it will be like something like this. Okay, integer x and y. So what I do is I maintain a list of coordinate, for example. Failed coordinate list. So I am writing a F, failed coordinate list. If you think if any of the result was false, right? If any of the result was false, what else I am maintaining is I have a Boolean array to maintain. So what Boolean array does is whether I should go to this particular node or not. Okay, when I went to this particular node, did I get a result or not? So whether it was a true or a false. So it just maintains a true, false, true, false, true, false kind of thing. So this just contains this coordinate list will just check whether in this Boolean array whether it's a true or a false. If it's a false, it will just straight away return a false. You don't have to do any calculations and just focus on the other parts. If it's a true, okay, if it's a true, then we can simply return it from here itself. So this is how the DP will come to the picture. Again, in the previous code only, when you see, we try to do like this. We say get of path. We write two conditions here, or get path two conditions here. Just right before this, we will say if your coordinate list dot contains coordinate, then just return false. You don't have to go through any of these points. That's all. So again, this is how. So every time, if you see, there is one common thing. We come with a recursion, and then we try to see if DP can help recursion or not, right? So this is about dynamic programming. These were the few questions I picked up to explain the concept. Let me know if you have any other questions as well.
One person has raised hand. Abhinav wants to join this hour.
Yes. May I know the
Hi,
question?
Abhinav. We are not able to hear you. Hello. I think we lost him. So, Siddharth, there were few questions which we got in Slido. So, one person has asked how to identify the elements of dynamic programming. So,
So elements of dynamic programming, as we talked about it, like it should be like if your subproblems are repeating, that's one of the things. Then when you have choices to make, these are the key things that you should always keep in mind to make sure that you're going with the DP approach.
okay,
As such, there is no short trick for dynamic programming things. Like there is no short trick at all.
okay. And Jazair has asked, can you describe a problem statement in your line of work that dynamic programming helped you to solve?
It's caching, right? A lot of times you might be using caching over your, be it your SQL databases or in-memory caches that you use, or even distributed caches that you use. So caches is nothing but you just check in the cache. If that value is available, you don't make a call to your database, right? You want to avoid those calls, those expensive calls. So that's where you use dynamic programming a lot. That's the kind of dynamic programming that you're doing.
Awesome. I hope we have got their answers.
Yeah.
So, does anyone have any other questions? You can ask in the question section. Or good. Awesome. So I can run a poll like if you have the question you can ask. Otherwise, we can go ahead then.
Sure.
Yeah, we don't have any question right now.
Sure.
So, are we done with the presentation, Siddharth?
Yes. Yes, Sana. Yes.
Awesome, awesome. Fine then. So, guys, thank you so much for attending this webinar. And if you guys have any other questions, Siddharth will be there in the social launch. So you can catch him up there and can ask your question there. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you so much, Siddharth. It was really a great webinar we had. Thank you so much.
Sure. Sure. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And
Thank you everyone for
guys,
joining. Yeah.
guys, I will be sharing a feedback form. If you can just fill it so that we can understand how the webinar is and what improvement we can have it here. So I'm just sharing the link here, and if you can take it, that would be really great. So please take it, and I'm sharing my social handles as well, even Siddharth's social handle, so you can follow us there for the future references. So I will be uploading this webinar on our YouTube channel. I will share a mail also to you so that you can have all the details there. Okay. Awesome then. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks.